Alright, Wisconsin. What do we know about it? Corn, cheese, alcoholism. You don't really think of witches when you think of Wisconsin, do you? That's more of like a New England thing, and I've covered that in a previous video. But you would think, given the high concentration of religiousness, boredom, and superstition in the Midwest, we would have a lot more rampant urban legends or even true history about the supernatural. Well, strangely enough, a great deal of our supernatural stories are concentrated in one state in particular: Wisconsin. What makes Wisconsin so unique culturally, and what monsters allegedly lurk in its vast and quiet fields? This Halloween season, I want to take you with me on an odyssey through strange and unusual Wisconsin legends, and maybe we'll spot something out there. Or maybe not. The first one is the tale of Whitewater, Wisconsin, a small college town a short drive from the popular tourist town Lake Geneva. It was here that back in the 1880s, a spiritualism school was established, and ever since, there have been tales of witches, seances, murder, and ghosts, all centered around the town's mysterious Witch's Tower. And then, we'll investigate the infamous Beast of Bray Road, a werewolf that has been spotted near Elkhorn, Wisconsin for decades, and coincidentally is a mere 20-minute drive from Whitewater. Come learn with me. You may have noticed I've been gone for almost 2 months after my last video. It's been a rough one here, guys. I had a trip to the ER, and then I was on some pretty strong antibiotics that really knocked me out. It's been rough. Longtime viewers will know that my health isn't awesome and hasn't been for like 15 years. It's just, I'm chronically ill and disabled. It happens. I'm working on it. I'm working to deal with it. Don't worry about me, I'm okay now. To everyone who was leaving me little messages saying that you miss me, thank you, it means a lot. And I'm really sorry that I have been sick instead of being able to upload the Halloween videos that I wanted to upload, so my schedule's all off. Don't worry, I won't push myself. I've learned from my mistakes. So, without further ado, let's get into it. To Wisconsin. Wisconsin was weird from the very beginning, or rather the beginning of when white settlers started showing up. Shocker. But ain't that just the story of the US though? Our earliest settlers were self-proclaimed militant Protestant Christians and Puritans. The Puritans specifically believed that the Church of England was too full of Roman Catholic influences, and in turn, the church was not tolerant at all of any dissenting views on religion. By the beginning of the 17th century, hundreds of Puritans began to flee Britain for the Americas, mostly settling in New England, where they established colonies, started killing the indigenous population, drank bad water, died a lot, and eventually started persecuting each other too. And it would only be a few decades before the Salem witch trials and vampire panic started up, because guess what happens when you take a bunch of extremely devout and defensive religious people and throw them into a harsh new environment where they start dying en masse? You get kind of a lot of religious psychosis and finger-pointing and superstition and mania. So, are we really that surprised that the US is the way that it is today, when its very foundations were based around the communities of people who were too weird for Europe, or whatever? And then those communities started expelling people who were too weird for them. And yes, that's how we get Wisconsin. In 1634, only a few years before things started really getting nuts in Salem, a French fur trader named Jean Nicolet appeared in Green Bay, Wisconsin, the first known European to have encountered Lake Michigan. He was dressed in a Chinese embroidered robe, brandishing 2 pistols, because he was convinced that he had made it all the way to China. He was an interesting fellow. As far as white dudes in North America goes, he was fairly tame. He lived for a long time with the Algonquin Nation, learned their language, ran a trade store, fell in love with an indigenous woman, and had a daughter with her. In Wisconsin, he encountered the Ho-Chunk people, who apparently thought he was amusing. Less than a decade later, after years of being the French ambassador to the native population, Jean Nicolet drowned in the St. Lawrence River near Quebec City at probably 43 years old. What a guy. And what a legacy he began, because from the moment that Wisconsin began attracting settlers, it was never ever normal. The people who came to establish their communities in Wisconsin were often extremely niche religious factions, bringing with them some very specific folk traditions, beliefs, and rules. So when something weird or unexplainable happens there, like many urban legends, it evolves and evolves, often taking on a uniquely arcane flavor, and it doesn't go away even when it's disproven. Case in point, Morris Pratt's Spiritualism Institute and the witches that came out of it. Today we often associate spiritualism with the supernatural or witchcraft because many of its core tenets, seances, communing with ghosts, etc., have made their way into pop culture as spooky, scary Halloween things. But in the 19th century, spiritualism was a very particular form of a science that had its roots in religion. It was the serious study of life beyond death, and if we can communicate with the spirits of the departed, to learn more about the spirit world and if it can connect us to God. A lot of this was born out of the grief following the Civil War, when mass death was very visible to people, and it was in such an immense way that they didn't really know how to handle it. So, of course they turned to things like spiritualism. Modern spiritualism began, as many believe, with a Swedish guy very aptly named Emanuel Swedenborg. In 1744, Swedenborg, who was a scientist, started claiming to have God-given visions that were showing him the truth of the scriptures, communicated to him by ghosts. To obtain more visions, Swedenborg meditated and took on a restricted diet of only coffee and sweets. Now, today it seems fairly clear that Swedenborg was probably suffering from some form of schizophrenia, but back then people were like, whoa, this guy's onto something. And from that, the new church was established in England, and beliefs floated over to the US by 1817. Unsurprisingly, this era was rife with dudes getting radical new prophecies whispered to them by ghosts. Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, began his spiritual journey in upstate New York, too. And only a short time later, in the same area, spiritualism as a movement exploded in popularity when in 1848, three sisters, Leah, Margaretta, and Kate Fox, began communicating with a ghost in their Hydesville home. They became wildly famous, going on to give lectures about how one can talk to the dead, before finally admitting that the whole thing was a hoax. Hilariously, many spiritualists today seem to think that it was never a hoax at all, but in the 19th century, spiritualism had a grip on post-industrialist religious populations who were hungry for answers to grand questions about life and death that fell in line with new accepted understandings of science. And honestly, the methods haven't changed that much. Modern paranormal investigators, like the Ghost Adventures guys for example, have almost identical theories about ghosts as the Victorian spiritualists, and the only difference is that now they use EMF detectors, spirit boxes, and infrared cameras instead of tapping codes and tilting tables. The core of it hasn't changed, like, at all. Enter Morris Pratt, yet another guy from upstate New York. In 1840, Pratt settled in Whitewater, Wisconsin with his three brothers, and he got married. Around this time, he became super invested in spiritualism and even got in contact with the Fox sisters themselves. Wisconsin was having a little bit of a spiritualist moment at large. In 1853, the Wisconsin governor, Nathaniel P. Talmadge, was convinced that ghosts were teaching his daughter how to play the piano. How nice of them. A few years earlier, his son William was walking on their property when he saw a hill and became enamored with it. He told his parents that he shall call it Rienzi Hill, and when he dies, he would like to be buried there. He died 2 weeks later, and the Talmadges granted his wish, and the Rienzi Cemetery is still there today. This was a huge reason why spiritualism became so important to the family, so that they could communicate with dearly departed William. Many others, like Morris Pratt, were the same way. Pratt was a controversial character in Whitewater. He liked to start fights and debate people who were critical of spiritualism. On numerous occasions, he had to be kicked out of businesses and churches for arguing with people. So, obviously, the locals were already wary of him. Then, in 1880, he vowed that if he ever became rich, he would build a temple to spiritualism. And it came true when he connected with a teacher named Mary Hayes Chenoweth, who claimed to be a powerful medium. Mary believed that she had been granted powers by God and could use them to help people and heal diseases. Mary and Morris Pratt connected with each other, and she instructed him to invest in what seemed to be an empty, useless plot of land in the Upper Peninsula on the guidance of a spirit. And so he did. In 1886, they struck a huge deposit of iron ore, and Morris Pratt became filthy rich instantly. So he fulfilled his promise and spent the last years of the 1880s building his Temple to Spiritualism, a school in Whitewater. Almost right away, people in town were like, oh great, here comes that weird guy building some kind of spooky building and being cagey about what it actually is. They called it Spook's Temple, or Pratt's Folly. The school, a lavish 3-story tall building, was at the time the only school in the world for spiritualists. Sadly, Morris Pratt would not live to see his dream fully realized. He died in 1902, and the Board of Trustees opened the school the next year. By this point, spiritualism had already become a little more niche. In the 1900s to 1910s, the school taught about 50-ish students at a time, many of whom actually lived in the building. They learned general subjects like math and literature, but also about mediumship, psychic culture, philosophy of spiritualism, and spiritualist history. Not that it was a very long history at that point, but still. The school also held public events like seances and lectures all the way through the 20s until the school closed once again in 1932, and then again after the war in 1946. Spiritualism, it seems, could not survive 2 world wars. The building, which was once on this intersection near the main street, was demolished in 1961, and a Wisconsin telephone company building was put in its place. I couldn't figure out which exact part of the intersection it was, though. The Morris Pratt School itself actually does still exist. It relocated to Milwaukee, and you can go learn there, but apparently only if you've already been a member of the Spiritualist Church for 2 years. I guess they don't want any posers. But as it always goes with urban legends, they don't really die. If the center of their myth disappears, it has to evolve and latch onto a new center. And with Whitewater, this happened around the 50s. By this point, the new students at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater had started circulating rumors about what the Morris Pratt Institute had been all about. Spiritualism was now increasingly associated with the occult and witchcraft, so the Pratt Institute students must have been witches. Rumors about this were already circulating in Pratt's own time. The college-age students began connecting dots between various spooky elements of Whitewater. The tunnels under the city, the fact that the 3 cemeteries in town form an isosceles triangle called the Witch's Triangle, where allegedly more paranormal activity is centered. Although, Jesus Christ, if there's 3 points in a city, they're gonna make a triangle. That's how shapes work. In one of these cemeteries, Oak Grove, it is rumored that the grave of an axe murderess named Mary Worth is buried. Or maybe she's buried in the public crypt in Hillside Cemetery. No one can say for sure, and the confusing thing is we actually have no real proof that Mary Worth ever was in Whitewater, or that she had anything to do with Bloody Mary, or was a witch, or maybe even existed at all. The kids say Oak Grove was where 19th century witches would perform sacrifices. We have no evidence for this either. Morris Pratt himself is buried at Hillside Cemetery, and funnily enough, there's 2 Pratt graves right near each other, and the one that people typically attribute to him is not his. It's some other guy. We did find the real one down the hill finally after swimming through a fucking horde of mosquitoes that are overrunning Wisconsin.
Oh my god, were they swingers? I mean, I guess if anyone was gonna be a swingers, it would be the spiritualists.
Yeah. The 3rd cemetery is Cavalry Cemetery on the university campus, and it's fine. As soon as rumors like these start, they don't really stop. People started claiming to see witches running around in robes, holding rituals, or living in the local water tower in Starren Park. But it's honestly much more likely that it was, unfortunately, maybe the KKK, which had a prominent chapter in Whitewater before World War II. The water tower is dubbed the Witch's Tower for seemingly no real reason other than it looks kind of creepy. It took on the brunt of the mythos after the Pratt Institute got demolished. People claimed that it was where a coven of witches live, or that people hold rituals there. The town put a spiked fence around it, but apparently at first they put the spikes facing inwards, so it looked like the town was keeping witches in rather than keeping mischievous students out. So yeah, definitely didn't help.
I have to admit the witch tower in person is actually quite scary looking. If I was stupid, I would believe there were witches in there. What's better than this? A drink from the haunted coffee shop, a boom made by my wife, and a witch tower.
Now, while researching for this video, I came across a series of interviews conducted by the now defunct Real Life TV on YouTube, and they got some really good and fun people in their lineup on the Witches of Whitewater, including the water super for the water tower. This interview is absolutely wild because it has a very good example of just how strongly this myth has taken a hold of people. He detailed his experience being attacked by a random guy who broke into the witch's tower thinking he would rid the town of actual witches after watching the trailer for the film Witches of Whitewater that never actually ended up happening.
And opened the door. Once I came in, I saw somebody here trying to crouch behind our control panel. Once I could wrap my head around somebody being in here, got my cell phone out and I called the police department. And just as I called the police department and walking in, he ran towards me head first, right into my stomach, and kind of knocked the wind out of me. My cell phone went flying before I was able to talk. So a fist fight ensued. All he wanted to do was get out. All I wanted to do was keep him here. And so we fought and fought for about 7 minutes, which seemed like an hour. And the police got here, both the university and Whitewater police. And by that time, I had climbed on top of him and had him pretty well subdued. He tried to bit my thumb off. As a matter of fact, I thought he did. He had just watched the trailer for the film Witches of Whitewater, and he wanted to rid the town of the witches. So that's why he came in here.
There are no witches living in the water tower. Real Life TV couldn't even find any solid witches to interview, other than, I guess, a Wiccan and a pagan, to the point where they interviewed a random Buddhist student inexplicably. They did also talk to Karen Weston, the archivist of the UW Whitewater Library. I'm not 100% sure if she still works there, but at the time she did. She gave a ton of very insightful history, including whipping out the infamous cursed book that students have spent decades whispering, again, conspiring that anyone who looks upon it will take their own life afterwards. But it's literally just a Catholic hymnal.
The book that will kill you if you open it. But it's a Catholic missal.
Well, what's kind of ominous?
No, actually, it's just a hymnal.
So you promise if I open this book, or you open this book, we're not going to commit suicide?
Not as far as I know. It's a good example of the book art, but it's not even a particularly old book. It's from the 1890s. It was as I understand it, in a monastery in Iowa.
Wow.
Within that locked room, which had government documents and university archive materials, a lot of it was in a small caged area, which was where we kept the university special collections. And so it was locked in a cage. Mm-hmm. I think that's where part of the stories came. If you wanted something out of special collections, you went to the circulation desk for the government documents librarian, somebody had to get keys out, they had to cross a hall, go over, open one door to get into the storage area, and open a third door to get into this locked area, and then of course the students couldn't come and look at it. We went in, pulled something out, relocked all the doors, and brought it over, and they used it in the reading room for government documents.
There's a lot of articles out there that are like, they're claiming it's just a Catholic hymnal. Yeah, no, because it is, though. The Catholics just have, like, really haunted swag, okay? The cursed book in Whitewater gained its reputation because for a while it was kept locked in a cage. Another thing that is not at all unusual if you know literally anything about old archives and where they have to, like, store random things when they run out of room. Anyway, Karen makes a very good point about why these legends keep creeping outwards to seemingly random locations in town. Before, all the rumors were centered around the Pratt Institute, but when it was torn down, the legends still needed a physical location for people to focus on. Hence, the Witch's Tower and the cemeteries became the new center of myth, allowing the stories to evolve more and more and keep themselves alive. We visited all 3 cemeteries on our visit, but were only able to actually get inside of 2. They were exceedingly normal as far as cemeteries go, aside from how many fucking mosquitoes were around. Oh my god, the mosquitoes. I was dying. I was so bit up for weeks afterwards. And I have such bad reactions to mosquitoes, I was miserable. There's even rumors about a mysterious monster in Whitewater Lake a few miles south. Apparently, in 1923, a bunch of fishermen claimed that their boat was capsized and that they were almost drowned by a huge tentacled creature. They managed to escape, but occurrences allegedly persisted into the 40s when the local dudes decided to put an end to the madness by heading to what may have been Oak Grove Cemetery, unearthing the weird vertical coffins there that we have no proof actually were there, and dumping them into the Whitewater Lake. Seemingly, this halted the weird happenings in town until 1992, when some local students spotted what looked to be a weird ritual being held on the lakefront, 4 men dressed in black, chanting and dancing, and then a fog emerged from the lake, bathed in a bright green light. The water began to splash and gurgle, and when they saw something emerging from the depths, the students ran away. Apparently, another local also saw this happening and called the cops, who clearly didn't take it seriously because they only showed up the next day, at which point, obviously, the men were already gone. But they did, according to legend, find bones and rocks in the sand, arranged in strange patterns. Who knows what really happened, or if this all even happened after all? In most cases like this, when a small town has a university and is already prone to supernatural rumors, it's common for students to pull stunts like this just to mess with people. Everyone wants to be a part of a collective legend. In 1981, the Alpha Sigma sorority heard weird, loud sounds from the basement of their house. When they went to investigate, they found scattered bricks and the frightening entrance to a tunnel that no one knew was there. This tunnel system stretches across town, a common thing to find in towns built in the mid-19th century, actually, but of course the explanation that everyone settled on was that the tunnels were used by the Whitewater witches to move between the old mansions in town without being seen. Back in the 70s, someone played a sick prank on the UWW campus and dug up the coffin of a little girl from Cavalry Cemetery and dropped it in the middle of campus, further fueling the fire about witches, cults, and Satanists. More often than not, it's none of the above. It's drunk 20-year-olds, especially in a small town in Wisconsin where there is truly nothing better to do. On our trip through Whitewater, it was immediately apparent why it has become such a focal point of the Midwest paranormal. It's incredibly small, quiet, with just enough spooky flavor and weird history to keep the energy alive for bored and imaginative students. And it seems like the locals love their identity as Second Salem. Not many places can lay claim to the title of being the center for spiritualism outside of the Northeast. If not for the mosquitoes, I would have loved to explore more than I did. Even though there's no scary witches, no serial killer ghost, and no satanic rituals. Whitewater is certainly worth a visit, if only for its history with spiritualism, a strange and misunderstood movement that brought a great comfort to a lot of grieving people. And that's not to say that Whitewater isn't haunted at all. While we were looking for Morris Pratt's grave at Hillside Cemetery, I came across the public vault and its door was open for some reason. I started peering inside when I suddenly felt like a drop in my stomach type of feeling, that visceral coldness that you feel when you're being watched. And I have never experienced this in any cemetery that I've been to, and I've been to actually hundreds of them, including some really old ones. This one had me jogging away immediately without a second thought. I really can't explain it. Ironically, when I later read up on the cemetery, that's when I learned that that vault in particular is the one that Mary Worth was allegedly held in. I mean, there's seemingly no evidence that this woman was ever in Whitewater, but who knows? The public vault was also just the vault where they kept unclaimed bodies, so maybe it was someone else. My fiance later told me that when she split off from me to look for the Pratt grave, she did see something moving in the distance, but couldn't really make out what it could be. We were the only 2 people there that day, other than the mosquitoes. So, who really knows? Ghosts or witches or not, the legends of the witches of Whitewater certainly say a lot more about us than it does about Morris Pratt. But then again, we'll never know if the school's attempts to reach beyond the veil of the living and the dead really did unleash something we can't fully see.
That thing, that was no dog. That was too big to be a dog. That thing was bigger than me.
If you've heard of any weird Wisconsin story, odds are it's this one. In the area surrounding Whitewater, Wisconsin, only a short 20-minute drive away, lies the sleepy town of Elkhorn, flanked on all sides by rolling meadows, dense patches of forest, and many, many farms and cornfields that have been nurtured by the same families for generations. A quick shot northwest is the town of Jefferson, where a mysterious creature, later known as the Beast of Bray Road, would first make an appearance. It was midnight in 1936, and Mark Shackleman, the security watchman at the St. Coletta's School for Exceptional Children, right off of Highway 18, spotted something disturbing in the indigenous burial ground on the property. It was some sort of demonic beast, he said, covered in ragged fur and standing on two legs, as big as a large man with pointed ears, long claws, and horrid sharp teeth. Terrified, he assumed it had to be a literal demon from hell, claiming that the beast had actually spoken, hissing something in a semi-human voice that sounded a lot like Gadara. Shackleman recalled later, when finally telling the story to his son, "I did the only thing I could do. I prayed to God to save me, and it turned and slowly walked away. It looked like it sneered at me. For a long time I stood there. That bad smell hung in the air, and then I said another prayer of thankfulness. I never saw that thing again, or anything even like it." When his son asked if he thought that the beast was supernatural, Mark smiled and said, "That damn thing came straight out of hell. Maybe my prayer sent it back to hell. I bet it didn't stay there." The beast would be spotted again in spurts through the 60s to 80s, sometimes being referred to by locals as the Bluff Monster or the Eddy. And then finally, the Beast of Bray Road, as sightings began to become concentrated around Bray Road near Elkhorn. The beast was being reported by dozens of locals over time, all of whom seemed to be entirely genuine and very frightened, and were all seeing the exact same thing: a huge 6-foot-tall manimal, or werewolf, roaming the area, eating roadkill, and generally disturbing the residents. Although it's hard to say if anyone really said that they were attacked by this thing. Most of them just said that it stared at them creepily.
It had really big claws, it was holding its roadkill like it had elbows, and it was kneeling on two knees, like a human being might do.
And this big thing come just like trucking, just trucking down the road at me, man. I looked at it and I'm like, and I ran, I got back in the car. And before I peeled off, that thing scratched the back of the car.
My adrenaline started pumping. I was scared.
He was big and he looked intimidating. I was scared of his appearance.
Made eye contact with both Scott and I and gave like this sneer, like it was challenging us. Like, what are you gonna do about it?
Not only that, but people were spotting it both at night and in broad daylight. Linda Godfrey, who also covered the Whitewater Witches, did a ton of investigative journalism on the beast, interviewing just about every witness she could track down for her book. Many of them had drawn sketches of what they saw. Many assumed that it was a dog, until it stood up and stared at them with a strange, aggressive, focused gaze. Eventually, the story escaped containment from just being a local ruckus, and all of a sudden, the Beast of Bray Road was a fixture of national cryptid conversation, which was sort of at its peak in the 2000s to early 2010s. Of course, Elkhorn cashed in on it as much as they could, offering werewolf cookies at bakeries and putting up a short-lived werewolf area sign. The locals were much less pleased with the sudden influx of werewolf tour buses and werewolf hunters suddenly on the prowl near their properties. Of course, when stories become popular like this, you sort of can't trust sightings afterwards as much. People want to see something and are looking for something, and oftentimes they project the fantasy onto benign things that they do see. Or they just lie, because it's exciting to be part of a big story. A werewolf story in the US is sort of unique after all. We have a lot of witch and ghost and demon and vampire myths and even random monsters, but not really as many werewolves. But there are a number of them. If you're interested in the topic, Linda Godfrey's book, Hunting the American Werewolf, is a great chronicle. On our way to Whitewater, Elkhorn is an easy stop. We pulled off towards Bray Road, the weather suitably foggy and eerie. It was quiet, not one other single person to be seen. We stopped at the intersection of Bray Road and Hospital Road, where one of the more famous beast sightings was. We didn't see the beast, nor did we hear or smell him. We didn't even see any remnants of his roadkill snacks. Just lots of corn, mosquitoes, and silence.
I don't see no beasts.
It's early. He's probably napping after terrorizing Elkhorn, Wisconsin all night long.
Or maybe we're just not pure of heart enough.
That's true.
Who knows? Maybe we came on a bad day, or maybe a good one in that we left unharmed. Maybe the beast really did go back to hell, or it's still out there lurking. Thank you for learning with me about Morris Pratt and the Beast of Bray Road. Have you visited Whitewater or Elkhorn, or gone to school there, or have you seen the beast? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to grab a copy of my graphic novel, Liberated, The Radical Art and Life of Claude Gahan. I think it's a pretty good read, given the situation we're in here in the US. And until next time, wash thy hands, wear thy mask, and don't park your brooms in the bus lane.